Well, I think it's really critically important to have healthy self-esteem. Now, there's a mistranslation in some of our texts which class self-esteem as a sin, but it's a mistranslation of kenodoxia, which is vainglory. Vainglory is something entirely different than self-esteem. We have to have a healthy understanding and love of ourself. First off, because God loves us, and we need to accept God's and to love ourselves in a healthy way means to accept God's love for us. And if we reject ourselves, if we hate ourselves, then how are we accepting God's love for us? Because and part of this, I think, there's an aspect of it which is based in trauma and how we process trauma and how we process abuse, which leads to self-hatred and toxic shame, which are sinful states of sin. In other words, a state of sin is a state of being not cut off but turned away from God. Because when we become absorbed by self-hatred and self-loathing and self-pity, self-hatred, self-loathing is a form of pride, actually, and self-pity is a form of vainglory. And what it is there's I hate to use positive and negative poles, but they're kind of two poles of these things. Both of them are inordinate concentration and focus on our ego, on the false self. So if in pride, we're all puffed up about ourselves, and it turns into arrogance and all of these other kinds of things. That we know everything. Everybody should honor it and all this kind of stuff. But self-hatred is also inordinate concentration on ourself. And both of these keep us completely wrapped up in ourselves and in our egos, and they blind us to the presence and the love of God. And so the idea is that we need to turn away from this self-focus, from this self-concentration, and especially on the focus on our ego, and turn towards God and allow ourselves to experience God's love, His compassion, His forgiveness, His acceptance, so that we can accept ourselves, so that we can love ourselves in a healthy way, so that we can have correct self-esteem, so that we don't have to be consumed by self-pity, but rather can simply accept things as they come. In other words, we also don't need to be seeking for constant affirmation and constant or praise and all of these kinds of things. Basically, a state of self-hatred is profoundly painful, and it comes out of immense pain. And so the whole point of the spiritual life is to heal that pain, or not the whole point, but that's an aspect of what happens in the spiritual life. Then that healing becomes the foundation, a solid foundation for authentic spiritual growth, which leads us to union with God, which leads us to cooperation and communion with God. Whereas when we're consumed by self-hatred and self-pity, there's no communion with God, there's no communion with anybody else, and we're isolated and alone. the core of the gospel, of course, is love. It's the love of God. And so to open ourselves to the love of God is the means by which we heal our soul, or by which God heals our soul, so that we can put all of that pain behind us, so that it can be forgiven, so that it can be healed, so that it no longer drags us down, and so that we can be in touch not simply with the false self, which is our ego, which is the product of our rational mind, but with our true self, the true man of the heart, the true person of the heart, which has the image of God within us, or which is the image of God within us, and which is immutable and was created perfect and beautiful and whole, and that cannot be damaged. And that's so important. The true person that is the core of our being cannot be damaged by anything. So it doesn't matter how bitterly somebody is abused, no matter how horrifically somebody might be disfigured or born as retarded or something or whatever. In the core of their being and the core of their soul is that true person that God created them to be in His image, which is perfect and beautiful and whole.